You know, it's the biggest question in all of history, isn't it? Do these larger-than-life figures actually bend the world to their will, or are they just in the right place at the right time? Well, to try and answer that, we are diving headfirst into one of the most epic rivalries ever, Athens versus Sparta.
What we're going to do is look at how, according to the ancient historians themselves, a pretty small group of brilliant and, let's be honest, sometimes deeply flawed leaders completely changed the game. We're talking about a 100-year stretch of almost non-stop war, and we're going to ask, how much did their leadership really matter?
Okay, so let's set the scene. The Persian Wars are over. Athens is basically a pile of rubble. But out of those ashes, something new is stirring, a huge ambition, and it's being driven by a new breed of leaders who aren't just thinking about rebuilding a city, they're thinking about building an empire.
So first up, we've got Themistocles. Now, according to the historian Thucydides, this guy was a master of strategy. See, Sparta got nervous watching Athens rebuild its walls, so they told them to stop. Themistocles goes to Sparta himself, supposedly to talk things out, but really, he's just stalling. He pulls off this incredible trick, making excuse after excuse just long enough for the Athenians back home to build those walls high enough to defend. That single act of foresight in the eyes of the ancients basically secured Athens' entire future.
And Thucydides doesn't mince words. He says it flat out. Themistocles was the architect. It was his vision, and his alone, that Athens' destiny wasn't on land. It was at sea. This one idea, from one man, was the seed that grew into the entire Athenian empire. The source is crystal clear. This was an individual transforming a nation.
But not everyone was on board with this plan. His biggest rival, Cimon, had a totally different vision for Athens. Cimon actually saw Sparta as a partner, a yoke partner, he called them. He was more of an aristocrat, building up the Delian League, this alliance against Persia, the old-fashioned way, through conquest. Themistocles, he saw Sparta as the real enemy down the road and wanted to empower the common people. This was a battle for the very soul of Athens.
But here's the thing. Cimon, in his own way, also transformed Athens. Plutarch explains his big policy move. He let the allies in the Delian League just pay Athens money instead of sending their own ships and men for campaigns. On the surface, it sounds like a win-win, right? The allies get to stay home and relax, but Plutarch points out the long-term cost was huge.
And just look at what happened. The Allied states got soft, their sailors forgot how to fight. Meanwhile, Athens took all that cash and built the most powerful navy the world had ever seen. As Plutarch saw it, the Allies literally paid for their own chains. Cimon's personal policy, whether he meant to or not, twisted a league of friends into an empire of subjects. That's another huge, history-altering change driven by one leader's decision.
So after Cimon, the stage is set for a new kind of leader, someone who's going to take all this power that's been building up and push it to its absolute peak, but also right to the brink of disaster.
And then comes Pericles. They called him the Olympian, and for good reason. He basically locks in the empire that Cimon and Themistocles started, pushes for an even more radical democracy at home, and adopts this aggressive, anti-Spartan policy that pretty much makes a massive war unavoidable.
What Thucydides says about him here is just fascinating. He says that in a democracy where the people are supposed to lead, Pericles was so powerful, so respected that he led them. He could get up in front of the assembly and tell them they were wrong, and they would actually listen to him. Think about that. This personal authority was so immense, it shaped Athenian policy for decades, and it steered them straight into the Peloponnesian War, a war he was convinced they could win.
And right at the start of the war, you see this perfect clash of leadership. Pericles' strategy for Athens was basically, let's become an island, everybody hide behind the city walls, let our navy and our money do the work, and just wait for Sparta to give up. On the other side, you have the Spartan king Archidamus, a total traditionalist. His plan, march into Athenian territory every single year, burn their farms, and try to force that big, decisive land battle. The whole first phase of the war was basically these two, very personal and totally opposite strategies slugging it out.
But a war this long and this brutal, it changes things. It chews up the old leaders and the old rules. It creates a vacuum for a whole new kind of leader. People who are more aggressive, more unconventional, and not afraid to break from tradition.
And Sparta's answer is this guy, Brasidas. And let me tell you, he was not your typical Spartan. Thucydides paints him as this incredibly energetic and charismatic figure who got that you can't just win with spears, you have to win people over.
Think about how smart this is.
He shows up in northern Greece and doesn't just act like a conqueror. He frames his whole campaign as the liberation of Hellas, freeing Greeks from the Athenian Empire. His personal charm and this savvy political messaging were revolutionary for Sparta. He proved they could beat Athens by being clever, not just by being tough. This was a total transformation in Spartan strategy, and it came from one man.
And if Sparta has its maverick, you better believe Athens has one too. Alcibiades. Where do we even start with this guy? He was brilliant, handsome, charming, and maybe the single most destructive person in the entire war. Was he Athens' greatest hope, or its absolute ruin?
You can almost feel Thucydides scratching his head trying to figure him out. On the one hand, Alcibiades is a genius general, persuasive and full of great ideas. On the other hand, he's completely self-serving, can't be trusted, and lives like there are no rules. Thucydides ultimately argues that the people's fear of his massive ambition is what wrecked the city. He was their best weapon and their biggest weakness, all rolled into one.
I mean, seriously, his career path is just insane. In 420, he's building an anti-Sparta alliance for Athens, and he's leading their biggest military operation ever. But when he gets into some political trouble, he just defects to Sparta and starts helping them. Then he flees Sparta and goes to work for the Persian Empire before, and you can't make this up, the Athenians ask him to come back and lead them again. The whiplash and the sheer chaos this one man's personal journey caused for everyone involved is just off the charts.
Okay, so the war has been dragging on for over 25 years now. Athens and Sparta are both exhausted, bleeding money and men. Sparta needs someone to land the knockout punch. They need a finisher.
And that finisher is Lysander. This guy was ambitious, totally ruthless, and a brilliant political player. And he did something that completely changed Spartan thinking. He realized that to beat Athens, Sparta had to stop trying to win on land. They had to take the fight to the sea.
So how does a land-based power suddenly build a world-class navy? Well, money talks, and Lysander knew who to talk to. Xenophon tells us he went directly to the Persian prince Cyrus and through his own personal diplomatic skill, secured a massive grant of 500 talents of silver. Persian gold, obtained by one man's efforts, paid for the fleet that would bring the Athenian Empire to its knees.
And his military masterpiece, according to Xenophon, was the Battle of Agaspotami. It was brilliant and utterly ruthless. First, he blockades the grain route to Athens, starting the clock on their starvation. Then, for 4 days, he sails out but refuses to fight. He's just watching, learning their routine. On the 5th day, he waits for the Athenian crews to beach their ships and go ashore to eat. Then he strikes. A total surprise attack on an empty, defenseless fleet. He captures almost all of their ships and ends Athens' naval power in a single afternoon. One man's cunning plan ended a 27-year war.
And just like that, it was over. The impact of Lysander's victory was total. The Athenian Empire was gone. Their famous long walls were torn down. Their democracy was overthrown and replaced by a brutal puppet government. Lysander's leadership didn't just win a war. It shattered the entire Greek world order and made Sparta the absolute master of Greece. So, we come all the way back to our original question. From Themistocles' dream of a naval empire to Lysander's final brutal victory, the ancient sources point again and again to the huge impact of these individuals. Their argument seems pretty clear. The vision, the charisma, the cunning of these specific men directly forged the destinies of their cities. But were they really masters of fate? Or were they just the perfect people with the perfect skills for a world that was already changing around them? That's the question their incredible stories leave us with.